What would it look like for somebody without that level of seniority that wanted to leave?
Well, that's the thing. That's the sort of point of the initiation is you don't leave, you're reborn. So in some
Oof.
sense, you're never, you can never leave except through death. You'll remember for life. And traitors are dealt with very, very harshly. Um, and I think for most people, because you can be a member of Black Axe and not necessarily engage directly in crime, most people would prefer to just slip into the shadows and
Drift
stay away.
off.
But there's always that danger, a favor will be called upon you at some
Yeah.
point. And that's where people become entrapped. And we did speak to young people who had been recruited. We even interviewed one guy who said he was forcibly recruited by a police officer
Hmm.
who was involved in the group. And you know, a lot of people get recruited and then feel trapped. And you often find that, kids who come from, poor backgrounds, they'll get recruited specifically to carry out the dirty work for more middle class members who have more resources and don't want to get their hands dirty. But they need kind of guys who can do the dirty work. And so there is a really kind of vicious cycle going on at a kind of, at a local level in Nigeria in terms of the recruitment that these guys carry out. There's another famous Black Axe character in Nigeria who we also interviewed called Tony Kabaka, and someone needs to make a film about this guy. I mean, he's like just the most extraordinary character. So he's known within Benin as the Godfather, and he grew up on the streets, living in abject poverty. He told the story of how they were so poor when he was young they couldn't even afford meat from the butcher, so they just take the blood that kind of dripped off the table during the butchering and would sort of turn it into a kind of black pudding,
Oof.
and kind of would eat this horrible kind of gruel as his sort of staple. So he grew up very hard and very tough and fought a lot of street fights and kind of gained respect through that. And and eventually through his kind of reputation as a kind of local hard man within, the slums of Benin, he caught the eye of a politician called Oshomole, who was an aspiring governor. And Oshomole made Tony Kabaka essentially his enforcer and henchman. And this is all very openly known. This isn't anything that Kabaka hides. He now, as a result of the patronage of Oshomole, lives in a Scarface-like mansion with kind of colonnaded white pillars. At one point, he had two pet lions and a chimpanzee. He, used to drive around in a kind of red convertible. The street in front of his house is named Kabaka Street. He's got, and if you go into his wardrobe in his bedroom, he's got kind of Louis Vuitton shoes and Jordans and, the best kind of designer clothing. And all over the walls of his house are pictures, portraits of his patron, Oshomole, the governor. And whenever Oshomole was running for election, he would call upon Kabaka to organize rallies. And Kabaka, through his popularity and financial patronage of guys on the streets, um, could organize enormous crowds very, very quickly. He could mobilize people to the ballot box. He could
Mhm.
mobilize people to protest if something went against the governor's favor. Um, and Kabaka was actually at one point put in charge of tax collection for the whole state. So using his network of heavies, he was able to massively increase the state's revenue, particularly in a place like Benin, where much of the economy is kind of informal and kind of barter market economy. He'd get tax from those people. So, if you were relying on them to file their own tax, no one's going to pay. But with Kabaka in charge, everyone's going to pay.
And I feel like it was a very variable tax rate.
I'm sure. I'm sure. And yeah, Kabaka becomes extraordinarily rich out of this. So does the governor, and so does the state. And he's very open about Kabaka's very open about this, and he's very open about being a member of Black Axe. And and that is where kind of the world of politics and organized crime become intertwined and interreliant
Yeah.
because you know, in a place as turbulent as that, where the opposition are almost certainly using similar tactics, it's a kind of a battle between the politicians to find the heaviest kind of support
Yeah.
in order to ensure victory, and the heavies expect reward in exchange. And again, in the data that we received, we actually saw email exchanges in which Black Axe members were being promised roles in government in exchange for winning elections. And yeah, Kabaka, he's yeah, quite a character. I mean, he had bullet holes sort of all over the front of his house from, and he sort of kept them there as a sort of almost like a, point of pride. He had a watchtower as he entered the front gate, and everywhere he went, he was surrounded by um, very intimidating big guys, and all his doors were bulletproof. I mean, he's literally living like in a little sort of fortress on his own street named after him in the middle of the city. And Yeah, I think you could find many other kind of less charismatic versions of him all over the country. And this is something that's not just coming from me. Nigerian academics have been saying this for years.
Yeah.
That these organized crime groups like Black Axe are having a massive hold on politics, and it's causing enormous damage to the country.